The
of
Indiana
her
Fever,
endurance, her
a franchise
on-the-court
often in the
activity,
spotlight, has been rocked by
making
an
sure that
announcement
she's
that has sent
healthy,
shockwaves through the entire
and then
WNBA.
continuing to
Coach
move forward
Stephanie
in
White
terms of
delivered news that many
mechanics.
believed was
Number one,
unthinkable, confirming
number
that
two,
three
basketball.
pivotal
She's got
players, Sophie,
The Indiana Fever just dropped a bombshell that has the entire WNBA on the verge of implosion. Coach Stephanie White, in what can only be described as a moment of brutal honesty, has confirmed what everyone suspected but nobody dared to say out loud. The veterans are furious, the locker room is a powder keg, and the new collective bargaining agreement that just leaked? It's about to change everything. And not in a good way. This isn't your typical sports drama. This is a full-blown civil war brewing inside the league, with millions of dollars, fragile egos, and the future of women's basketball hanging in the balance. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about the WNBA. Let's set the stage. On the surface, Stephanie White's return to Indiana looked like a fairy tale. A franchise legend coming home to coach the hottest young team in the league, led by none other than Caitlin Clark, the player who single-handedly turned the WNBA into must-watch television. It was supposed to be the feel-good story of the year. A homecoming. A reunion. A chance to build something special. But if you dig just one layer deeper, you'll see this isn't a fairy tale at all. It's a nightmare. Because Stephanie White didn't just sign up to coach basketball. She walked straight into the epicenter of a labor war that threatens to rip this league apart from the inside out. And the veterans? They're ready to burn it all down. See, Caitlin Clark didn't just bring ratings when she entered the league. She brought something far more dangerous. A financial earthquake that has completely shattered the fragile ecosystem the WNBA spent decades building. We all saw the packed arenas. We all saw the viral highlights. But what we didn't see was the resentment building behind closed doors. The locker room tensions. The wealth gap that opened up like a canyon between the rookies and the veterans. And now, with leaked details of the new collective bargaining agreement making the rounds, that resentment has turned into full-blown rage. Stephanie White's recent comments have confirmed it. The noise isn't just loud. It's deafening. And the upcoming season isn't just about basketball anymore. It's a battle for the soul of the league. Why did this coaching hire trigger such a massive reaction? Why are people losing their minds over Stephanie White coming to Indiana? Because this isn't just about X's and O's. It's about money. It's about power. It's about a generation of players who feel like they're being erased from the very league they built. The leaked details of the new agreement have everyone on edge. Veterans are terrified they're about to lose their jobs. Rookies are being catapulted into superstardom before they've earned it, at least in the eyes of the old guard. And sitting right in the middle of this chaos is Stephanie White, who has to somehow hold this fragile team together while the entire league watches to see if she can pull off the impossible. Let's talk about what Stephanie White gave up to be here. Because leaving Connecticut wasn't just a career move. It was a betrayal in the eyes of many. In Connecticut, White had built a defensive fortress. She had a team of battle-tested veterans who played the kind of gritty, physical, in-your-face basketball that made opponents dread facing them. They were title contenders every single year. Nobody wanted to play the Sun because you knew you'd wake up the next morning covered in bruises. White had job security. She had respect. She had a system that worked like clockwork. So why would she walk away from all of that to join a team that, despite all the hype, is still rebuilding and defensively fragile? The answer is simple: power. The center of the basketball universe has shifted to Indianapolis, and Stephanie White knows it. This is where history is going to be written. This is where the next dynasty could be born. But this homecoming comes with strings attached. Heavy, tangled strings that could strangle the chemistry of this team before the season even tips off. Because the Indiana Fever of today is nothing like the fever that Stephanie White played for years ago. Back then, the league was a grind in the truest sense. Players flew commercial, crammed into middle seats like everyone else. They stayed in average hotels. They played for the love of the game because the money simply wasn't there. Fast forward to now, and the Fever is a traveling rock concert. They sell out arenas. They need private security just to move around. The spectacle has become bigger than the sport itself, and here's where things get interesting. Sources close to the league are saying that White's move wasn't just about coaching Caitlin Clark. It was a rescue mission. The front office knew they had a problem. The previous leadership had been criticized heavily for failing to protect their star player, not just from the hard fouls and physical play on the court, but from the relentless media circus off of it. Stephanie White was brought in to be a shield, a veteran presence who could absorb the heat and deflect the chaos. But by accepting this role, she painted a target on her back the size of a billboard. The rest of the league, including the players she used to coach in Connecticut, now looks at Indiana with a toxic mix of jealousy, disdain, and professional frustration. White is no longer just a coach. She's the guardian of the league's golden child. And that position has isolated her from the very fraternity of coaches and players who once respected her. She's become the face of the new WNBA, which puts her directly at odds with the old WNBA that shaped her entire career. The psychological toll of this cannot be overstated. She has to look her former players in the eye, players she went to war with, players she trusted, and now she's standing on the sideline defending the very player those veterans were trying to physically intimidate just a few months ago. Think about that for a second. The emotional weight of that is crushing. But let's talk about the real reason the veterans are seething. Money. Not just good money. Generational, paradigm-shifting, life-changing wealth that has completely disrupted the hierarchy of women's professional sports in a way we've never seen before. When the details of Caitlin Clark's Nike deal surfaced, valued at a staggering $28 million over 8 years, it didn't just break records. It broke spirits. It fundamentally changed what it means to be a WNBA player. Let me put this in perspective so you understand the rage. The maximum salary for a WNBA veteran, the absolute most a player can make from their team, is around $240,000 a year. Most players make significantly less. We're talking under $100,000 for many of them. Caitlin Clark will earn more from a couple of photo shoots and a commercial spot with Nike than legends like Aya Wilson or Breanna Stewart will earn from their actual basketball contracts over several seasons combined. Let that sink in. This is the Nike bomb that created an immediate class divide no amount of PR training can hide. In the locker room right now, you've got rookies flying on private jets for endorsement deals, staying in penthouses, and having brands throw money at them like confetti. Meanwhile, 10-year veterans are sitting there worrying about their post-career pensions and whether they need to go play overseas in Turkey or China during the off-season just to keep up with their mortgage payments. This isn't just about jealousy. This is about erasure. The veterans feel like the industry is telling them that their blood, sweat, and tears over the last 20 years were worth absolutely nothing compared to the hype surrounding one rookie class. They feel like the league is saying, "Thanks for keeping the lights on, but we don't need you anymore." And now Stephanie White has to walk into a locker room where this financial disparity is the elephant in the room that nobody wants to acknowledge. How do you motivate a veteran role player to dive on the floor for a loose ball, risking a career-ending injury, just to save a game for a rookie who makes 50 times her salary and has a guaranteed safety net waiting for her? That's not just a coaching challenge. That's the coaching challenge of the century. The resentment isn't always loud, either. Sometimes it's just a look, a hesitation to pass the ball, a passive-aggressive comment in a press conference about earning it. And with the recent leaks about signature shoes and merchandise royalties, that resentment is approaching a boiling point. Caitlin Clark is getting a signature shoe before she's even won a championship. Only a tiny handful of women in basketball history have ever received that honor. To the old guard, this feels like a violation of the unwritten rules of sports. You get paid when you win. But in the new economy, you get paid when you trend. The financial resentment was the fuel, but the explosion happened when the WNBA Players Association opted out of the current collective bargaining agreement. This is the technical side of the drama, but it's the most important part because it dictates the future of every single person in this league. The CBA is the contract between the league and the players. It controls everything. Salaries, travel rules, pregnancy benefits, everything. By opting out, the players are essentially threatening to strike, demanding a bigger piece of the pie. But here's where it gets messy. The leaked details of the negotiations reveal a harsh reality that complicates the entire narrative. The players are demanding massive salary bumps and revenue sharing, and their arguments are based on the explosive growth of the league over the last 12 months. But everyone knows, though very few will admit it publicly, that this growth is tied almost exclusively to the Caitlin Clark effect. The viewership numbers, the ticket sales, the merchandise revenue, it all spiked the moment Clark entered the league. This puts the veteran leadership in a deeply hypocritical bind. They're publicly criticizing the media attention Caitlin Clark receives, claiming it's unfair and biased, while simultaneously using her popularity as the main leverage to demand millions of dollars in raises. They're eating the food Caitlin Clark cooked while complaining about the chef. It's a paradoxical nightmare that's creating a divide between the players who bring in the views and the players who feel like they've paid their dues. The veterans are saying we deserve this because we built the league. But the business metrics are saying you're getting this because one player changed the math. The leaks suggest the players want a business model that mirrors the NBA, with a 50-50 revenue split. But league insiders are warning that the math doesn't add up yet. If the league caves to these demands, the financial structure of every team will change drastically, and this brings us to the most terrifying rumor circulating right now. The veteran purge. This is the dark side of the new agreement that nobody wants to discuss openly because it's too scary to contemplate. There's a theory making the rounds among agents and mid-level players that a higher salary cap will actually lead to fewer jobs for veterans. Here's how it works. If the new CBA raises the minimum salary to around $150,000 and the maximum to $500,000 or more, teams are going to have to be ruthlessly selective about who they keep on the payroll. Right now, a team might keep a beloved veteran on the bench because she's a good locker room presence, she knows the plays, and her salary is manageable. But if that veteran suddenly costs $500,000, she gets cut. It's simple economics. Teams will replace expensive mid-tier veterans with cheap rookies on entry-level contracts to save money for their superstars. The middle class of the WNBA, the solid starters and reliable role players who have been the backbone of this league, are the ones who will suffer the most. This is why the rage Stephanie White is dealing with is so potent. It's not just anger. It's existential fear. The veterans looking at Caitlin Clark aren't just seeing a star. They're seeing the catalyst for an economic shift that might force them into early retirement. They know that as the Clark economy takes over, the league will become younger, faster, and more marketable, leaving the middle class of the WNBA behind. Stephanie White has to manage a team where half the roster is wondering if they'll even have a job in 2026. This creates a desperate, cutthroat atmosphere during practice that is miles away from the sisterhood the league loves to promote. Every drill, every scrimmage, every preseason game becomes a fight for survival. Players aren't just competing for minutes. They're competing to prove they're worth the new expensive contracts that are coming down the pipeline. And here's the ultimate irony. Last year, Stephanie White was the general on the other side of this war. As the coach of the Connecticut Sun, she managed players like Dejounte Carrington and Alyssa Thomas, who became the face of the anti-Clark resistance. We all remember the incidents. The hard fouls that sent Clark crashing to the floor. The mocking gestures. The tense post-game interviews where they refused to give the rookie any credit. Stephanie White stood by her players then. She defended their physicality. She dismissed the idea that they were targeting Clark, calling it just playoff basketball. She was the protector of the old guard style of play. Now, in a twist straight out of a Hollywood script, she's crossed enemy lines. She's now responsible for the well-being of the very player her former team tried to break, both physically and mentally. This puts White in a double-agent scenario that's ripe for drama. Does she have the trust of the Fever players who watched her defend Carrington last year? Can she really look Caitlin Clark in the eye and say I have your back when 6 months ago she was scheming to shut her down? And how does she handle the inevitable matchups against Connecticut? The first time the Fever plays the Sun this season, it won't just be a game. It will be a psychological thriller played out on live television. Stephanie White knows exactly how her old team plans to stop Clark because she wrote the playbook. She knows their tendencies, their triggers, their weaknesses. But she also knows that her old players feel betrayed by her departure. She chose the golden ticket in Indiana over the grit of Connecticut, and that adds a layer of personal animosity to the mix. Stephanie White isn't just fighting the narrative. She's fighting her own past. She has to convince the Fever locker room that she's 100% all in, despite spending the last year trying to beat them into submission. And she's smart enough to know she can't pretend the toxicity doesn't exist. In her first few press appearances since taking the job, she's used one specific word over and over again: noise. She talks about blocking out the narratives, ignoring the social media comments, and focusing on basketball. But by constantly bringing it up, she's confirming that the noise is deafening. She's admitted that the emotional management of this team is going to be the hardest part of the job. She's dealing with players who check their phones at halftime and see thousands of comments, some worshiping them, some tearing them apart. The racial and cultural tensions that flared up last season haven't gone away. They've just gone dormant for the off-season, waiting for a spark to reignite them. White's strategy seems to be one of insulation. She wants to build a wall around the Fever, creating an us-against-the-world mentality. But that's hard to do when the world includes your fellow WNBA players blasting you in podcasts and on Twitter. Stephanie White has to act as a filter, absorbing the toxicity from the league and making sure it doesn't touch her star player. It's an exhausting role, and it requires a level of emotional intelligence that goes far beyond drawing up plays on a whiteboard. She has to be a coach, a therapist, a PR manager, and a bodyguard all at once. And she has to do it knowing that one losing streak will have the media calling for her head. Let's dig deeper into the rage of the veterans, because it's often misunderstood as simple pettiness. But it's not. It's rooted in a deep sense of injustice. Imagine working at a company for 15 years, building it from the ground up, accepting low pay because you believed in the mission. Then a new hire walks in and immediately gets a corner office, a company car, and a salary 10 times what you make, simply because they went viral on social media. That's what this feels like to the veterans. They gave everything to this league when nobody was watching, when the arenas were empty, when the money was non-existent. And now they're being told their sacrifices don't matter because one player brought the spotlight. The WNBA is at a crossroads, and Stephanie White is standing right in the middle of it, trying to hold everything together while the foundation crumbles beneath her feet. The question isn't whether the rage is real. The question is whether anyone can survive it.